The quiet maid who never met his eyes slipped into the forbidden forest on a moonless night, and when Alpha King Frank followed her past the cursed trees, he watched her unravel into something celestial and catastrophic. A creature whose very existence was bound to either destroy his bloodline or become the only thing powerful enough to save it. Welcome back to my channel, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy the story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. The goblet shattered before it hit the stone floor. Violet stood frozen, wine spreading like spilled blood across the great hall's marble, her pale fingers still trembling in the shape of what she'd been holding. Around her, the other servants barely glanced up. This was, after all, the third goblet this month. The quiet maid had a gift for destruction, though only when he entered a room. Alpha King Frank Ashenblade paused mid-stride, his silver eyes flicking to the mess, then to her. Just for a heartbeat. Then he continued toward the war table as though she were merely another shadow clinging to the castle walls. Which was exactly what Violet needed him to believe. She dropped into a clumsy curtsy, grabbed a cloth, and crouched to clean the mess. Her hands shook, not from fear of punishment, but from the sheer effort it took to keep her skin from glowing, her bones from humming, her true form from clawing its way to the surface every time he came near. It was getting harder. The pull was getting stronger. Violet. She froze. He'd never said her name before. Not in 3 years. Your Majesty? Her voice came out barely above a whisper, the way she'd trained it to. Frank stood with his back to her, hands braced on the war table, maps of the Northern Territories spread before him. His commanders had already fled the room. No one stayed when the Alpha King wanted silence. His dark hair fell across his battle-scarred shoulders, and even from across the hall, she could smell him. Pine and smoke and something wild that made her pulse spike. You've been here 3 years, he said, his tone flat, unreadable. You've broken 47 goblets, 11 plates, and 1 very expensive vase from the summer court. She blinked. He'd been counting? Yes, Your Majesty. I'm terribly sorry. I'll work to repay. I'm not asking for repayment. He turned, and the full weight of his gaze landed on her like a physical thing. I'm asking why you're still here. Her breath caught. Did he know? Could he sense what she was? I serve the castle, Your Majesty. I have nowhere else. You flinch every time I enter a room. You avoid eye contact. You smell like the forest even though you never leave the castle grounds. His head tilted, wolf-like, studying. And every full moon, your scent changes. Shifts. Like you're becoming something else. Violet's heart slammed against her ribs. She forced herself to meet his eyes, just for a moment, and saw not suspicion, but curiosity. And something else. Something that looked almost like concern. I'm just a maid, Your Majesty. Liar. The word was soft. Almost gentle. But it hit like a blade. She straightened slowly, cloth still clutched in her hands, wine staining her fingers red. I've given you no reason to doubt my service. No, he agreed. You've given me 3 years of perfect, terrified obedience. Which is why I know you're hiding something. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. The great hall felt too large and too small all at once. Violet's skin buzzed with the effort of staying human, staying small, staying invisible. Then Frank did something she didn't expect. He smiled. Just a slight curve of his mouth, more sad than amused. I'm not going to hurt you, Violet. Whatever you are, whatever you're running from, you're safe here. The kindness in his voice nearly broke her. Because he was wrong. She wasn't safe here. He wasn't safe with her here. And tonight, when the moon went dark and the forest called her name in a voice like thunder, she would have to answer. She would have to stop hiding. And when she did, everything he'd built, his kingdom, his bloodline, his life, would be at risk. Thank you, Your Majesty, she whispered, lowering her gaze again. You're very kind. She didn't see the way his jaw tightened. Didn't see the way his hands curled into fists. Didn't see the way he watched her retreat from the hall as though he wanted to call her back, but didn't know what words to use. But she felt his gaze on her back like a brand. And she knew, with bone-deep certainty that tonight would change everything. The moon refused to rise. Violet stood at the edge of the castle courtyard, staring at the tree line of the forbidden forest. The sky was black, starless, as though the heavens themselves had turned away. The air tasted like iron and old magic. It was time. She glanced over her shoulder at the towering castle behind her, at the warm glow of torches in the windows, the distant sound of guards laughing, the life she'd borrowed for 3 stolen years. Then she stepped into the forest. The trees swallowed her whole. Branches twisted overhead like skeletal fingers. Roots writhed beneath her feet. The deeper she walked, the colder it became, until her breath misted in the air and frost crept across her skin. She didn't stop until she reached the heart of the woods, a clearing ringed by ancient stones, where the ground hummed with power older than wolves, older than kings. Violet closed her eyes. "I can't hide anymore," she whispered to the darkness. And then she let go. Pain lanced through her body, sharp, bright, inevitable. Her bones cracked and reformed. Light burst beneath her skin, constellations trying to escape. Crystalline azure armor erupted from her shoulder and forearm, beautiful and terrible, forged from starlight and prophecy. Her eyes ignited, glowing brilliant blue. Wings of shattered moonlight unfurled from her back. The forest bowed, and every wolf within 10 miles dropped to its knees. Violet, no, not Violet anymore, not the quiet maid, opened her eyes and saw the world as it truly was. Threads of fate glowing like silk. Destinies tangled and knotted. And one thread, burning brighter than all the others, leading straight back to Violet. She spun. Frank stood at the clearing's edge, sword drawn, silver eyes wide with something between awe and horror. He'd followed her. Of course he had. "Your Majesty," she said, and her voice was layered now, ancient and melodic and wrong for a human throat. "You shouldn't be here. Neither should you." He took a step forward, and she noticed the way his hand trembled on the sword hilt. Not from fear, from restraint. "What are you?" She wanted to lie. Wanted to tell him to run. Wanted to protect him from the truth. But the prophecy was already unfolding. The forest was already waking. And the creature bound to her awakening, the one meant to destroy everything he loved, was already rising from the shadows behind him. "I'm the reason you're going to die," she whispered. Then the wraith screamed. The wraith materialized like a nightmare given form, smoke and bone and hatred, so ancient it had fossilized into something worse than death. Its hollow ribcage rattled with each movement, and where its face should have been, there was only a skull split into too many jaws, each one screaming in a different voice. Frank moved before Violet could shout a warning. He was fast, faster than any human, his wolf rising to the surface as he lunged between her and the creature. His sword sliced through the wraith's torso, and for a heartbeat, Violet thought maybe steel would be enough. Then the blade passed through the creature like it was made of mist. The wraith's claws came down. Violet's hand shot forward on instinct, and celestial fire exploded from her palm, a shield of burning blue that caught the blow inches from Frank's throat. The impact sent shockwaves through the clearing, rattling the ancient stones, shaking leaves from branches that hadn't moved in centuries. Frank staggered back, eyes snapping to her. "What?" "It can't be killed with steel," she shouted, pouring more power into the shield as the wraith hammered against it. Each strike sent cracks spider-webbing through the light. "It's bound to me. Part of the prophecy. It wakes when I do. Then we put it back to sleep." Frank circled to the side, wolf gold bleeding into his silver eyes. His body rippled, bones shifting beneath skin, and Violet realized with a jolt that he was about to transform. "Don't." She threw up her other hand, summoning a second barrier just as the wraith split into 3 separate forms, each one shrieking in different directions. "Your wolf can't touch it. It feeds on living essence. If you shift, you'll make yourself a bigger target." Frank froze mid-transformation, human and wolf warring across his features. "Then what do we do?" "You run," Violet said flatly. "You go back to your castle and pretend you never saw this." "Absolutely not." "Your Majesty. My name is Frank." He spun, blade flashing as he tried again to strike the nearest wraith. It scattered like smoke, reforming behind him. And I don't run from fights in my own forest. This isn't your forest anymore. Violet dissolved one shield and slammed a bolt of celestial fire into the center wraith. It shrieked, writhing, but didn't fall. The moment I transformed, everything here belongs to the prophecy. Including you. She saw the realization hit him, the way his jaw tightened, the way his gaze darted to the tree line as if calculating an escape route. But instead of running, the stubborn fool stepped closer to her. Then I guess we're both trapped, he said, and there was something almost like amusement in his voice. As if being hunted by an unkillable monster in a cursed forest with a celestial being he'd thought was a maid was somehow entertaining. Violet would have laughed if she wasn't so busy trying to keep them both alive. The three wraiths circled, moving in perfect synchronization. Hunting. Testing. And then, all at once, they struck. Violet met the first with a blast of starfire. Frank dove under the second, rolling across the frost-slicked ground and coming up with a fallen branch that he hurled like a spear. It passed harmlessly through the creature, but it bought them a second. The third wraith went for Violet's back. She sensed it too late, spun, power already gathering in her palms, but she knew she wouldn't be fast enough. Then Frank was there. He slammed into her, his body colliding with hers, sending them both crashing to the ground as the wraith's claws raked the air where her head had been. They hit the earth hard, Violet's wings flaring to cushion the impact, and suddenly she was pinned beneath him, his chest pressed against hers, his face inches away. For one impossible moment, everything stopped. She could feel his heartbeat, wild and strong and alive, thundering against her ribs. Could smell pine and smoke and something uniquely him that made her celestial fire flicker and surge in ways it shouldn't. His silver eyes locked on hers, wide with adrenaline and something else. Something that looked like recognition. You saved me, she breathed. You saved me first, he countered. The wraith screamed. Frank rolled off her, pulling her to her feet with one hand while his other grabbed a stone from the ground, as if that would help. Violet's wings spread wide, casting blue-white light across the clearing, and she saw the three wraiths merging back into one, growing larger, more solid, more real. It's learning, she said, horror creeping into her voice. It's adapting to my power. Can you kill it or not? Frank positioned himself at her back, and she felt the heat of him even through her armor. I don't know. I've never, she cut herself off, shame burning through her chest. 3 years hiding. 3 years running from what she was. And now, when it mattered, she didn't even know the extent of her own power. The wraith lunged. Violet threw everything she had at it, fire and light, and the fury of stars dying in the void. The blast lit up the entire forest, turned night into searing day, and when the light faded, the wraith was still there. Smaller. Wounded. But still there. And now it had stopped looking at her. Its empty skull turned slowly, deliberately, toward Frank. Violet's blood turned to ice. No, she whispered. No, that's not right. What? Frank raised his sword, but she could see the exhaustion in his stance. They'd been fighting for minutes that felt like hours. What's wrong? The prophecy. Her voice cracked. I always thought I was the weapon. That I would be the one to destroy your bloodline. The wraith took a step toward Frank. Then another. But I was wrong, Violet breathed. I'm not the weapon. The creature lunged. It is. Violet moved without thinking. She threw herself between Frank and the wraith, her wings wrapping around him like a shield, and unleashed every ounce of power she'd been hoarding, every scrap of celestial fire she'd kept locked away. The explosion tore through the clearing. Light. Heat. Sound that shattered the ancient stones and sent wolves howling for miles. When the smoke cleared, the wraith was gone. But so was Violet. Not dead. Not destroyed. Just gone. Frank stood alone in the ruined clearing, his armor scorched, his sword fallen from nerveless fingers. Around him, his wolves emerged from the shadows, whimpering, pressing close as if seeking comfort. But he couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't think past the image of her, wings spread, eyes blazing, sacrificing herself for him. The maid who broke goblets and avoided his gaze and smelled like the forest. The celestial being who was supposed to kill him. The woman who had just saved his life. Violet, he whispered to the empty air. The forest didn't answer. But somewhere deep in the twisted dark, beyond the reach of moonlight or starfire, he felt a pulse. A heartbeat that matched his own. A thread of fate still connecting them. She was alive. And he was going to find her. Even if he had to tear the entire forbidden forest apart, root by cursed root. Frank didn't return to the castle. He couldn't. Not when every instinct he possessed was screaming at him to search, to hunt, to find her. His commanders would be furious. His council would declare him reckless. But they didn't understand what he'd felt in that clearing, the way her celestial fire had wrapped around him like a living thing, protective and fierce. The way she'd looked at him with those blazing blue eyes, like he was worth dying for. No one had ever looked at him like that. His wolves spread out through the forest, noses to the ground, searching for any trace of her scent. But the explosion had scorched the earth, leaving nothing but ash and the lingering smell of starlight, which, Frank was discovering, was remarkably unhelpful as a tracking scent. Your Majesty. Frank spun to find Rowan, his beta, emerging from the shadows. The man's clothes were torn, his face scratched, and he looked like he'd fought his way through half the forest to get here. I told you to stay at the castle, Frank growled. And I told you 3 years ago that I don't follow suicidal orders. Rowan's golden eyes swept the ruined clearing, taking in the shattered stones, the scorched earth, the lingering traces of power that made the air taste like metal. So, the maid isn't actually a maid. Brilliant observation. And she's, what exactly? A goddess? A demon? A very angry fairy. Celestial being. Frank crouched, running his fingers through the ash. Still warm. Bound by prophecy to destroy my bloodline. Or so she thought. Rowan was quiet for a moment. Then, but she saved you instead. Yes. Interesting. Frank shot him a look. If you're about to lecture me, I'm about to tell you that her scent trail leads east. Rowan pointed toward the darkest part of the forest, where even moonlight refused to venture. Toward the hollow. Every wolf in the clearing went still. The hollow was forbidden for a reason. It was where the forest's heart beat, where old magic pooled like stagnant water, where creatures that predated wolves and men still slumbered in the dark. No alpha had ventured there in 3 generations. Of course it does, Frank muttered. He straightened, adjusting his sword belt. Gather a hunting party. 5 of our best. No. Frank blinked. Excuse me. You heard me. Rowan crossed his arms, and despite being several inches shorter and significantly less terrifying than his alpha, he didn't back down. You're not taking anyone into the hollow. If the prophecy is real, if there are more of those wraith creatures, you'll just be leading them to slaughter. Then I go alone. Also no. Rowan. You go alone, you die alone, and then I have to explain to the entire kingdom why their Alpha King decided to chase after a woman he's known for 3 years, but never actually spoke to until today. Rowan's expression softened slightly. She saved your life, Frank. Don't waste it by throwing it away. Frank wanted to argue. Wanted to pull rank, to snarl and snap until his beta submitted. But Rowan had been his friend long before he'd been his second-in-command, and the bastard had a point. I can feel her, Frank said quietly. Here. He pressed a hand to his chest. Like a thread connecting us. She's alive, Rowan. And she's in pain. Rowan's jaw tightened. The mate bond. Don't. Frank. It's not we're not. Frank dragged a hand through his hair, frustration warring with something that felt dangerously close to hope. I barely know her. Your wolf seems to disagree. And that was the problem, wasn't it? Because his wolf had been pacing, snarling, obsessed with the quiet maid for months now. Had noticed every time she dropped something. Every time she blushed. Every time she fled a room like his mere presence burned her. He'd thought it was just attraction. Curiosity about the strange, skittish girl who smelled like magic. He hadn't realized his wolf had been trying to tell him something far more dangerous. I'm going after her, Frank said. With or without your permission. Rowan sighed. I know. Which is why I'm coming with you. Rowan. 2 wolves are better than 1. Especially when one of those wolves is an idiot who's probably going to get himself killed for a woman who's prophesied to destroy him. Despite everything, the fear, the exhaustion, the bone-deep certainty that he was about to do something catastrophically stupid, Frank smiled. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Rowan started toward the eastern tree line, then paused. By the way, your council is going to have you drawn and quartered for this. Add it to the list. They moved through the forest like shadows, 2 wolves prowling through territory that didn't want them. The trees grew denser the deeper they went, branches clawing at their clothes, roots trying to trip them. The temperature dropped until frost glittered on the bark. And everywhere, Frank could feel her. Not just the thread connecting them, but her presence woven into the forest itself. As if by transforming, she'd claimed this place. Made it hers. Frank, Rowan whispered. Look. Up ahead, the trees opened into another clearing. But this one was different. The ground was covered in flowers, impossible, beautiful flowers that glowed with soft blue light. They swayed without wind, their petals humming with the same celestial energy that had wrapped around Frank in the battle. And in the center of the flowers, half buried in luminous blooms, was Violet. Frank's heart stopped. She was curled on her side, wings folded around herself like a cocoon, her celestial armor dimmed but still visible. Her face was peaceful, almost serene, and for a terrible moment he thought. Then her chest rose. Fell. Rose again. Breathing. Alive. Frank was moving before he could think, crossing the clearing in long strides, dropping to his knees beside her. Up close, he could see the exhaustion etched into her features, the way her power flickered weakly beneath her skin. She'd burned herself out saving him. Violet, he whispered, reaching for her shoulder. Her eyes snapped open. They were still blue, still glowing, but now there was something else in them. Recognition. Fear. And something that looked heartbreakingly like relief. You're alive, she breathed. So are you. You shouldn't be here. But even as she said it, her hand came up to touch his wrist, her fingers cool against his skin. The contact sent electricity racing up his arm. It's not safe. The prophecy. I don't care about the prophecy. Frank. You saved my life. He shifted closer, and she didn't pull away. You were supposed to kill me, and instead you threw yourself between me and that creature. Why? She looked away, but he caught her chin gently, turning her face back to his. This close, he could see the faint constellation of freckles across her nose, the way her lower lip trembled slightly. Why, Violet? Because, she whispered, and her voice cracked on the word. Because I've been watching you for 3 years. Serving you. Learning you. And somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you as the target I was supposed to destroy and started seeing you as. She trailed off, but Frank's heart was already racing. As what? As the one thing in this entire cursed world worth protecting. The confession hung between them, fragile and fierce. Behind them, Frank heard Rowan tactfully retreating to give them privacy. But all he could focus on was Violet, the way she looked at him like he was something precious, the way her hand still rested against his wrist. I broke a lot of goblets, she said suddenly, and there was the ghost of a smile on her lips. Because every time you walked into a room, I forgot how to be human. My power would spike and I'd lose focus, and everything would just shatter. Frank laughed, a rough, surprised sound. I thought you were just clumsy. I am. But only around you. He should pull away. Should remember that she was dangerous, that prophecies didn't just disappear, that taking her back to his castle would risk everything. But instead, he did something far more reckless. He slid his hand from her chin to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. Then I'll have to buy more goblets. Her breath caught. Frank. Come back with me. Please. His voice dropped to something rough and raw. Let me protect you this time. You can't protect me from what's coming. The wraith was just the first. There will be more. The prophecy demands. Then we'll break the prophecy. He leaned closer, and he could feel her celestial fire responding to him, wrapping around them both like it had in the clearing. Together. For a long moment, she just stared at him. Then, slowly, she smiled, a real smile, not the timid thing she'd worn as a maid. "You're insane." "Probably." He stood, offering her his hand. "But I'm also an alpha king who just watched a woman fight a monster to save him. I'm not letting you disappear into this forest." Violet looked at his hand, then at his face, then at the flowers glowing around them. And finally, she took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. Her wings dissolved into starlight, her armor fading until she looked almost human again. Almost. Except for the glow in her eyes and the way power still clung to her like morning mist. "The council will want me imprisoned," she said quietly. "Or executed." "The council can try." Frank laced his fingers through hers, and something in his chest settled at the contact. "I'm the Alpha King. And you're under my protection now. That's going to cause problems." "Good. I was getting bored anyway." She laughed, a startled, genuine sound that made his wolf purr with satisfaction. And as they walked out of the clearing together, Rowan falling into step behind them, Frank realized something that should have terrified him, but instead felt inevitable. The mate bond wasn't just forming. It had already formed. And prophecy or not, wraiths or not, he wasn't letting her go. The castle was in chaos when they returned. Guards rushed to meet them at the gates, relief and shock warring across their faces. Servants whispered behind their hands. And standing at the top of the grand staircase, arms crossed and expression thunderous, was High Counselor Theron, a man who'd been lecturing Frank about responsibility since he was old enough to shift. "Your Majesty," Theron said, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "How generous of you to return. We were beginning to think you'd gotten yourself killed chasing after." His words died as Violet stepped into the torchlight beside Frank, her hand still clasped in his. The entire courtyard went silent. Violet looked different now, not quite the timid maid, but not fully the celestial being either. Something in between. Her eyes had dimmed to a soft gray-blue, but power still flickered beneath her skin like contained lightning. And the way she stood, shoulders back and chin raised, spoke of someone who'd stopped hiding. "That's not possible," someone whispered. "The maid." "Wasn't just a maid," Frank finished, his voice carrying the weight of an alpha's command. "Lady Violet is my guest. She will be treated with the same respect you'd show any member of this court. Is that understood?" No one dared answer. Which was answer enough. Theron descended the stairs slowly, his calculating gaze moving between Frank and Violet. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should speak. Privately. Anything you need to say, you can say in front of her." "I really don't think." "Now, Theron." The High Counselor's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Very well. The girl is obviously not human. She radiates power that my wolves can sense from across the courtyard. So the question becomes, what is she, and why did you bring a potential threat into our stronghold?" "She's not a threat. With respect, Your Majesty, you don't know that." "I do, actually." Frank's hand tightened around Violet's, and he felt her answering squeeze. "Because she had the opportunity to kill me tonight and chose not to. Instead, she saved my life." Murmurs rippled through the gathered crowd. Theron's expression flickered with something that might have been concern. "Saved you from what?" "A creature bound to prophecy," Violet said quietly, and every head snapped toward her. "I'm not from this world, Counselor. I was sent here 3 years ago. Hidden. Meant to sleep until the time came for me to fulfill my purpose." "Which was?" Theron's voice had gone dangerously soft. "To destroy the silver bloodline." The courtyard exploded. Guards reached for weapons. Wolves snarled. Someone screamed. And Frank felt Violet tense beside him, saw her eyes start to glow brighter, felt her power rising in response to the threat. Enough. His alpha command rolled across the courtyard like thunder, and every wolf, guard, servant, and counselor alike, dropped to one knee. Even Theron, though the old man looked like it physically pained him. "She is under my protection," Frank said, his voice cold and absolute. "Anyone who raises a weapon against her answers to me. Are we clear?" Silence. "I said, are we clear?" Yes, your majesty, came the ragged chorus. Frank helped Violet up the stairs, keenly aware of every eye tracking their movement. Rowan materialized at his side, a solid presence, while Theron followed a few paces behind, his expression unreadable. They made it to Frank's private study before the High Counselor finally spoke again. You've claimed her. It wasn't a question. Frank poured himself a drink, then a second for Violet, who took it with shaking hands. I've offered her sanctuary. That's not what I said. Theron closed the door, sealing them in with thick oak and older magic. You've claimed her. The mate bond has formed. I can see it in your eyes, your majesty. In the way you stand too close. In the way your wolf surfaces every time someone so much as looks at her wrong. Frank didn't deny it. Couldn't. She was sent to kill me, he said instead. But the prophecy was wrong. Or incomplete. The real threat is the creatures her awakening unleashed. Then we kill the creatures. They can't be killed by normal weapons. Steel passes through them. Claws can't touch them. Frank met the older man's gaze steadily. The only thing that could hurt them was her celestial fire. Which means you need her, Theron finished. He was quiet for a moment, studying Violet with an intensity that made her shift uncomfortably. Do you know why you were sent here? Who created the prophecy? No. Violet set down her untouched drink. I only know fragments. I was asleep, in a way. My true self locked away. The maid persona was all I could safely maintain. And now that you've awakened? Now the prophecy unfolds. Her voice was small, haunted. The wraith we fought was only the first. There will be others. Stronger ones. And they're all drawn to. She stopped abruptly, her gaze cutting to Frank. Drawn to what? He asked, though dread was already pooling in his stomach. To you, she whispered. The prophecy binds them to hunt the Alpha King's bloodline. Every creature I awaken will come for you. And they'll keep coming until either they're destroyed, or you are. The study fell into heavy silence. Outside, Frank could hear the normal sounds of the castle, guards changing shifts, servants preparing the evening meal, life continuing as though the world hadn't just shifted on its axis. Theron poured himself a drink. Downed it. Poured another. Well, he said finally. That's unfortunate. Despite everything, Frank almost smiled. Your gift for understatement remains unmatched. How many creatures are we talking about? Rowan asked from where he leaned against the doorframe. Violet's hands twisted together. I don't know. The prophecy is old, older than kingdoms, older than your wolf lines. It speaks of 7 trials. 7 beasts. Each one stronger than the last. 7. Frank ran the numbers. 1 had nearly killed them both. 7 would. No. He wouldn't think about that. Then we prepare, he said. Fortify the castle. Train the guards. Research the prophecy. There has to be a way to break it. Or, Theron said carefully, you could distance yourself from the girl. If the creatures hunt your bloodline specifically, and she's the one awakening them. No. The word came out flat, absolute, and left no room for argument. Frank crossed to where Violet stood and took her hand again, feeling her cold fingers warm in his grip. I'm not sending her away. Your Majesty. She saved my life, Theron. And even if she hadn't, even if the prophecy declared her my enemy, I wouldn't abandon her to face this alone. His jaw tightened. The mate bond has formed. You know what that means. Theron's expression softened slightly. It means your wolf has chosen. And wolves mate for life. Exactly. It also means, the High Counselor continued, that if she dies, you'll follow shortly after. The bond works both ways, Your Majesty. Her pain becomes yours. Her death becomes yours. Frank had known that, intellectually. But hearing it said aloud made it real in a way that stole his breath. He looked at Violet and found her staring at him with something like horror. You can't, she breathed. Frank, if the mate bond, if I'm putting you in more danger. You're not. He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. The creatures were always going to come. You didn't create the prophecy. You're just caught in it. Same as me. And I'd rather face it with you than without you. Her eyes shimmered, and for a moment he thought she might cry. Instead, she leaned into his touch, just slightly, and whispered, "You really are insane." Starting to see a pattern there. Rowan cleared his throat. So, training regime for fighting unkillable shadow monsters. Should be a fun addition to the morning drills. Despite the tension, Violet laughed, a small, surprised sound. Theron sighed deeply, as though the weight of the entire kingdom rested on his shoulders. Which, Frank supposed, it sort of did. "Very well," the High Counselor said. "If we're doing this, we're doing it properly. Lady Violet will need proper quarters." "She stays in the royal wing," Frank interrupted. "Your Majesty, that's highly irregular. She stays where I can protect her. Non-negotiable." Theron pinched the bridge of his nose. "Of course. Why did I think you'd make this easy?" He headed for the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, Your Majesty, your father would be proud. Reckless, terrified, and utterly convinced you've lost your mind. But proud." After Theron and Rowan left, the study fell into comfortable silence. Violet wandered to the window, staring out at the courtyard below where wolves still gathered in nervous clusters. "They hate me," she said quietly. "They fear you. There's a difference." "Is there?" She turned, and in the firelight, she looked impossibly young. Impossibly vulnerable. "I've brought nothing but danger to your home. Maybe Theron is right. Maybe I should." Frank crossed to her in 3 strides and kissed her. It wasn't planned. Wasn't calculated. But the moment his lips touched hers, something inside him settled. The mate bond flared bright and warm, wrapping around them both, and he felt her sharp intake of breath before she melted into him. She tasted like starlight and smoke and something indefinably her. Her hands came up to grip his shoulders, and he deepened the kiss, one hand tangling in her hair while the other settled at her waist, pulling her closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Violet stared at him with wide eyes. "What was that for? You were about to say something stupid about leaving." His thumb traced her lower lip, and he watched her pupils dilate. "Couldn't let that happen. So you kissed me." Seemed like the most efficient solution. She laughed again, and this time it sounded less fragile. More real. "You know this is a terrible idea, right? The mate bond, the prophecy, all of it. Probably the worst idea I've ever had." He rested his forehead against hers. "But I stopped caring about good ideas the moment you saved my life. Frank. Stay. Please." His voice dropped to something raw. "Not because of the prophecy. Not because of the mate bond. But because I want you here. Because 3 years of watching you from across rooms wasn't enough. Because I need to know who you really are, beneath the maid and the celestial being and everything else." Violet's hands slid from his shoulders to his chest, right over his heart. "You might not like what you find. Then I'll deal with it." He kissed her forehead, soft and gentle. "Together. That's the deal." For a long moment, she just stood there, eyes closed, absorbing his warmth. Then, finally, Okay, I'll stay." She opened her eyes, and they were bright with determination and something that looked like hope. "But when the next creature comes, and it will come, I fight beside you. No more sacrificing myself to save you. No more running into danger without backup," he countered. "Deal." They sealed it with another kiss, softer this time, sweeter. And as the fire crackled and the castle settled around them, Frank allowed himself a moment of pure, reckless optimism. They had 6 more trials ahead of them. 6 more creatures that would come with claws and prophecy and death. But they'd face them together. And that had to count for something. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation and politics. Frank's council met twice daily, debating everything from defensive strategies to whether Violet should be allowed to move freely through the castle. Theron argued for restrictions. Frank argued for common sense. They compromised by assigning Violet a guard detail, which lasted exactly 4 hours before she accidentally melted one guard's sword when he startled her in a hallway. "I said I was sorry," Violet muttered as they walked through the training grounds on the 3rd morning. "How was I supposed to know celestial fire and steel don't mix?" Frank bit back a smile. "You turned his blade into liquid metal. It was an accident." He screamed. "So did I." She looked so genuinely distressed that Frank finally let himself laugh. Over the past days, He watched her slowly relax into her true self, less the timid maid, more the woman who'd fought a wraith to save him. She still dropped things occasionally, but now she'd set them down with deliberate care while shooting him accusing looks, as if his mere presence was still a distraction. Which, fair enough. He couldn't stop staring at her either. The guards will adjust, he assured her. Eventually. They think I'm going to murder everyone in their sleep. Only some of them think that. The others just think you're going to accidentally destroy the castle. She swatted his arm, and he caught her hand, lacing their fingers together. The contact sent warmth racing up his arm, the mate bond, settling deeper with each touch, each shared glance. They'd been careful not to push too fast. Stolen kisses in empty hallways. Lingering touches when no one was watching. But every night, Frank lay awake in his chambers, keenly aware that Violet was just down the hall, probably also awake, probably also fighting the pull between them. The bond wanted them together. Completely. But Violet had been through enough without adding that pressure. So Frank waited. And tried very hard not to think about the fact that waiting might be the death of him. Frank, Rowan called from across the training yard. We have a problem. Of course they did. Frank and Violet made their way to where Rowan stood with 3 scouts, all looking grim. One of them, a young wolf named Thea, had claw marks across her shoulder, already healing, but still angry red. What happened? Frank demanded. Eastern border, Your Majesty, Thea reported. We found tracks. Large ones. And the trees. She swallowed hard. They were frozen solid. Ice spread across the bark like veins. Whatever made those tracks, it's not natural. Violet went very still beside him. Show me. They followed the scouts to the eastern edge of the territory, where the forest grew wild and untamed. Frank saw the tracks first, massive paw prints, each one the size of a dinner plate, pressed deep into the frozen ground. But it was the trees that made his blood run cold. They were encased in ice, not just frost, but solid, crystalline ice that spread from their roots to their highest branches. And carved into the largest trunk, glowing with pale blue light, were words in a language Frank didn't recognize. But Violet did. Her face had gone white. No, she whispered. Not yet. It's too soon. What does it say? Frank asked, though dread was already curling in his stomach. It's a summons. Her voice shook. The second trial has begun. The Ice Warden is awake. How long do we have? Until nightfall. She turned to him, eyes wide with fear. Frank, this creature, it's not like the Wraith. The Ice Warden is ancient. Powerful. It won't just attack, it'll freeze everything in its path. The forest. The castle. Anyone who tries to stop it. Then we don't let it reach the castle. Frank's mind was already racing, calculating. We meet it in the forest. On our terms. You can't fight it with normal weapons. I know. Which is why you'll be there. He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. We do this together. Remember? She took a shuddering breath, then nodded. Together. Rowan was already barking orders, assembling a strike team. Theron appeared from seemingly nowhere, his expression grave. Your Majesty, if this creature is as dangerous as Lady Violet claims, then we end it tonight, Frank said. Before it threatens anyone else. And if you can't? Frank's jaw tightened. We will. They spent the remaining hours preparing. Frank armed himself with his father's blade, ancient steel forged in wolf fire, one of the few weapons that might stand a chance. Violet practiced controlling her celestial fire, sending small bursts of blue flame across the training yard while nervous guards watched from a safe distance. And through it all, Frank felt the mate bond humming between them, a constant reminder that they were in this together, for better or worse. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold, they gathered at the eastern border. 20 of Frank's best warriors. Rowan at his right hand. Theron hanging back with the reserve forces, ready to evacuate the castle if things went wrong. And Violet, standing beside Frank, her armor beginning to shimmer into existence as she let her true form surface. If I don't make it back, she said quietly, tell Theron he was right. This was a terrible idea. You're making it back. Frank took her hand, feeling the warmth of her celestial fire against his skin. Both of us are. She squeezed his fingers. Promise? Promise. It was a lie. They both knew it. But sometimes lies were kinder than truth. The temperature dropped as the sun disappeared below the horizon. Frost spread across the ground, creeping like a living thing. The wolves shifted uneasily, their breath misting in the suddenly frigid air. Then the ice warden appeared. It was massive, easily twice the size of the wraith, with a body made of crystalline ice and ancient bone. Its eyes glowed with cold blue fire, and where it walked, the ground froze solid, flowers wilting and dying in its wake. But it was the intelligence in those eyes that truly terrified Frank. This wasn't a mindless beast. It was a hunter. And it was looking straight at him. Alpha King, it said, and its voice was like wind over frozen lakes. The prophecy calls for your blood. Then come and take it, Frank snarled and charged. The battle erupted in chaos. Frank's wolves attacked from all sides, but the ice warden moved like liquid, flowing around their attacks. Every time claws or teeth found purchase, they came away frozen, useless. One wolf yelped as his paw shattered like glass. Violet's celestial fire cut through the air, slamming into the creature's side. It stumbled, roaring, and for a heartbeat Frank thought. Then it laughed. Starfire. The ice warden turned toward Violet, almost curious. How quaint. But you're newly awakened, little star. Your fire is a candle against my glacier. It raised one massive paw, and the ground beneath Violet exploded with ice. She jumped back, but not fast enough. Ice wrapped around her ankle, crawling up her leg, and Frank watched in horror as frost spread across her celestial armor. No. He was running before he could think, his blades swinging in a wide arc. It connected with the ice warden's limb, and impossibly, the ancient steel bit deep. The creature howled, jerking back. Frank didn't wait. He grabbed Violet, his body heat melting the ice around her ankle, and pulled her free. Are you hurt? I'm fine. But her teeth were chattering, her fire dimming. Frank, your sword. I know. He stared at the blade, at the way frost now crept along its edge. His father's sword, burning with wolf fire, was one of the only things that could touch this creature. But every strike drained it, and they both knew it wouldn't last. The ice warden circled them, wary now. Impressive, Alpha King. But your weapon weakens. And when it fails, you will freeze. You will shatter. And your bloodline will end. Not tonight, Violet said through gritted teeth. Her eyes blazed brighter, and Frank felt her power surge through the mate bond. Frank, I need you to trust me. Always. Then give me your hand. He didn't hesitate. The moment their fingers touched, celestial fire and wolf fire merged, blue and gold twining together, impossible and beautiful. Power flooded through Frank like lightning, and he gasped as his senses sharpened, his strength doubled, his connection to every wolf in the clearing magnified tenfold. The mate bond, he realized. They were fighting through it. Fighting as one. Together, Violet whispered, and he could feel her emotions bleeding into his fear and determination and something fierce that might have been love. Together, he agreed. They moved as one. Frank charged, his father's blade burning brighter now, fed by Violet's celestial fire. The ice warden met him head-on, ice and steel colliding with a sound like breaking worlds. And behind him, Violet unleashed everything. Celestial fire poured from her hands, but it was different now, warmer, fiercer, touched with wolf gold at its edges. It wrapped around the ice warden like chains, burning away ice, cracking ancient bone. The creature screamed. Frank drove his blade deep into its chest, right where a heart should be, and felt Violet's fire surge through the steel, burning from the inside out. For my bloodline, Frank snarled. For my pack. For her. The ice warden shattered. Not slowly. Not gracefully. It exploded in a burst of ice and light and rage, shards flying in every direction. Frank threw himself over Violet, shielding her with his body as frozen debris rained down. When the dust settled, the clearing was silent. Frank pulled back slowly, checking Violet for injuries. She was pale, exhausted, her celestial armor flickering weakly. But alive. Gods, she was alive. Did we? We did. He helped her to her feet, and she sagged against him, her strength spent. Around them, his wolves were picking themselves up, shaking off frost, checking each other for wounds. They'd won. Barely. But they'd won. 2 down, Violet whispered against his chest. 5 to go. Frank held her tighter, breathing in her scent, starlight and smoke and home. We'll face them. All of them. Together. Together. As they walked back toward the castle, Frank felt the mate bond settle deeper, warmer. They'd fought as one tonight. Protected each other. Trusted each other. And if the remaining 5 trials were worse than this, which they probably would be, at least they'd face them side by side. It had to be enough. It had to be. The castle celebrated their victory for exactly 1 night before reality set in. 5 more trials. 5 more creatures. And no one knew when the next would come. Frank watched from his study window as workers repaired the eastern wall, reinforcing it with iron and ancient wards that Theron swore would hold against ice and shadow. Below, in the training yard, his wolves drilled relentlessly, not that it would help much against creatures that couldn't be touched by normal weapons. You're brooding, Violet said from the doorway. He turned to find her leaning against the frame, looking more relaxed than he'd seen her in days. She'd traded her maid's uniform for proper clothing, fitted leather and soft wool that somehow made her look both dangerous and impossibly beautiful. I'm strategizing, he corrected. You're brooding. She crossed to him, and he automatically reached for her, pulling her against his chest. She fit perfectly there, like she'd been made for it. I can feel it through the bond. All that worry churning around in your head. The mate bond had been growing stronger. Now he could sense her emotions even when she wasn't nearby, contentment when she read in the library, irritation when council members whispered as she passed, fierce determination when she practiced her celestial fire. And at night, when she was alone in her chambers, he felt something else. Longing that matched his own. We barely survived the Ice Warden, he said quietly. What happens when the 3rd trial comes? Or the 4th? What if next time we'll win? Her fingers traced patterns on his chest, and he wondered if she knew it was driving him mad. We fight together, remember? Your wolf fire and my celestial fire. We're stronger combined. Are we strong enough? She pulled back to look at him, and her eyes were serious. I don't know. But I know that giving up isn't an option. Not for me. Not for you. And definitely not for this kingdom full of wolves who are starting to tolerate my existence. Despite everything, he smiled. Thea asked to train with you yesterday. I know. I accidentally set her hair on fire a little bit, but she said it was totally worth it to learn how to fight creatures made of nightmare. Violet's expression softened. They're not afraid of me anymore. Well, not as much. It's nice. You're part of the pack now. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. They protect their own. Even celestial beings sent by prophecy to destroy their Alpha King? Especially those. She laughed, and the sound eased some of the tension in his chest. These moments, these stolen pockets of peace between battles, were becoming precious. Necessary. Frank, she said, her tone shifting to something more hesitant. Can I ask you something? Anything. The mate bond. I can feel things from you. Her cheeks colored slightly. Emotions. Wants. And I know you're holding back because you think I'm not ready, but... His heart stopped. Violet. I'm ready. She met his gaze steadily, no wavering. I've been ready. I just didn't know if now was. He kissed her. Not the careful, gentle kisses they'd been sharing. This was desperate, claiming, 3 years of watching her from across rooms and 3 days of fighting beside her and 3,000 unspoken words poured into one perfect moment. She made a small sound of surprise, then melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt. The mate bond flared hot and bright between them, and Frank felt every ounce of her want, her need, her absolute certainty. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Violet's eyes were glowing softly blue. So that's a yes, she managed. That's a I've been going slowly insane trying not to claim you properly. His voice came out rougher than intended. But Violet, I need you to be sure. The mate bond, once we complete it, there's no going back. You'll be bound to me. To this pack. To whatever future we carve out together. I know. Her smile was luminous. I want that. All of it. You. Something in Frank's chest cracked open. Even knowing what's coming? The trials, the creatures. Especially knowing that. She cupped his face, forcing him to meet her glowing eyes. Because if we're going to face prophecy and death and impossible odds, I want to do it as yours. Completely. He was moving before he could think, scooping her up and carrying her toward his chambers. She laughed, startled, her arms wrapping around his neck. Subtle, she teased. I'm done being subtle. He kicked the door closed behind them, sealing them in with thick oak and the dying light of sunset. And for the first time in days, maybe in 3 years, Frank let himself stop thinking about prophecies and trials and death. There was only her. Only this. Only them. Later, much later, they lay tangled together in his massive bed, moonlight streaming through the windows. The mate bond hummed between them, complete now, settled deep in Frank's bones like it had always been there. Violet traced lazy patterns on his chest, her head resting over his heart. Can I tell you something? When I first arrived at the castle, when I was just starting to hide as a maid, I saw you in the Great Hall. You were arguing with Theron about something, and you were so alive. So certain of yourself. And I remember thinking, this is the man I'm supposed to kill. Frank's hand stilled in her hair. What changed your mind? You did. She propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. I watched you for 3 years, Frank. I saw how you protected your pack. How you listened to even the lowest servant's concerns. How you took responsibility for every decision, every loss. And somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you as a target and started seeing you as the best thing I'd ever found. His throat tightened. I noticed you too. Long before I should have. There was something about you, the way you moved through the castle like a ghost, the way you smelled like the forest even when you never left. My wolf recognized you before my human side did. Fate, she said softly. Or luck. Take your pick. She smiled and settled back against him. For a while they just lay there, content in the silence. Then, Frank? Do you think we can actually win this? All 7 trials. He wanted to lie. Wanted to promise her they'd survive, that everything would be fine, that prophecy was just words. But she deserved better than comfortable lies. I don't know, he said honestly. The trials are getting harder. And we barely survived the second one. So what do? We fight. We adapt. We find the weaknesses in the prophecy and exploit them. His arms tightened around her. And we trust that being together makes us stronger than being apart. You really believe that? I have to. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Because the alternative is losing you, and that's not an option. She was quiet for so long he thought she'd fallen asleep. Then, I love you. The words were so soft he almost missed them. But the mate bond carried them clear and bright, and Frank felt his entire world tilt. Violet, you don't have to say it back. I needed you to know. Before the next trial comes. Before things get worse. I needed you to know that whatever happens, this was real. You were real. And I love you too, he interrupted, rolling to face her. From the moment you dropped that first goblet and looked at me like I'd personally offended gravity. I've been gone for you, Violet. Completely gone. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. We're ridiculous. Absolutely. He kissed her softly. Falling in love in the middle of a prophecy designed to kill us? Terrible timing. The worst. But I wouldn't change it. His hand found hers, lacing their fingers together. Not one moment. Not even the goblets. She laughed through her tears, and the sound was so perfect, so her, that Frank committed it to memory. Whatever came next, whatever horrors the remaining trials brought, he'd have this. He'd have her. And that had to be enough. The summons came 2 days later. Frank woke to find frost creeping across his window, spelling out words in a language that made his wolf snarl with rage. Beside him, Violet sat bolt upright, her eyes blazing blue. The third trial, she whispered. It's here. They dressed quickly, armor and weapons strapped on with practiced efficiency. The castle was already stirring, guards rushing to battle stations, wolves gathering in the courtyard. Theron met them at the gates, his expression grim. Western border this time. The scouts report, shadows. Hundreds of them. Moving like a plague. Shadows? Frank exchanged a glance with Violet. The shades swarm, she said, and her voice carried the weight of old dread. Third trial. They don't attack individually, they overwhelm. Drown you in darkness until there's nothing left. How do we fight them? Light. She looked at her hands, at the celestial fire already flickering there. Constant, unrelenting light. If the shadows reach us, if they touch skin. She didn't finish. Didn't need to. Frank turned to his assembled wolves. 20 warriors, all looking to him for leadership. For hope. We hold the line, he said, his alpha voice carrying across the courtyard. We protect the castle. We protect each other. And we don't let the darkness win. A chorus of howls answered him. As they marched toward the western border, Violet slipped her hand into his. The mate bond pulsed between them, warm, steady, unbreakable. Whatever happens, she said quietly. Together, he finished. They reached the border just as the sun began to set. And saw what was coming. The shade swarm wasn't just shadows, it was a living tsunami of darkness, rolling across the forest like a wave of night made solid. Trees withered as it passed. Flowers died. Even the ground seemed to blacken, as if the shadows were draining life itself. And at the heart of the swarm, barely visible through the churning darkness, was a figure. Tall. Ancient. Made of pure shadow. The Shade King. It raised one hand, and the swarm surged forward. Light them up, Frank commanded. Violet's celestial fire exploded outward in a wall of blue-white flame. It hit the leading edge of the swarm, and shadows screamed, recoiling. But there were so many of them, and for every shadow that burned away, 3 more took its place. The wolves fought with everything they had. Claws coated in blessed silver. Torches soaked in holy oil. Even Rowan wielding some kind of ancient relic that glowed with golden light. But it wasn't enough. The shadows kept coming. One touched Thea's arm, and she screamed as darkness spread across her skin like a poison. 2 more wolves went down, their howls cut short as shadows swallowed them whole. Fall back, Frank roared. Retreat to the second line. They pulled back, and Violet laid down another wall of celestial fire. But Frank could see her exhaustion, could feel it through the mate bond. She was burning herself out, and the swarm showed no signs of slowing. The Shade King stepped through the wall of fire like it was nothing. Alpha King, it said, and its voice was every nightmare Frank had ever had. Your bloodline ends tonight. I've heard that before, Frank snarled, charging forward. His father's blade cut through shadow, and impossibly, it bit deep. The Shade King hissed, jerking back, and Frank pressed the advantage. But fighting one king meant leaving the swarm unchecked. Behind him, he heard Violet scream, not in pain, but in fury. Her celestial fire blazed brighter, hotter, and through the mate bond, he felt her pulling on every ounce of power she possessed. Frank, she shouted. I can stop them. But I need you to trust me. What do you need? The mate bond. Give me everything, your wolf fire, your strength, everything. He understood immediately. And it terrified him. Because giving her everything meant leaving himself vulnerable. Defenseless. But he'd promised. Together. Always together. Take it, he said, and opened the mate bond completely. Power flooded out of him like a river. His wolf fire, his strength, his very essence, all of it pouring into Violet through their connection. He staggered, falling to one knee, and watched through dimming vision as she rose into the air, wings spread, blazing like a star brought down to earth. For the pack, she screamed. For my mate. For us. Light exploded outward. Not just fire, but pure, radiant light, celestial and wolf-born merged into something entirely new. It consumed the shade swarm, burning away darkness, reducing shadows to nothing. The Shade King tried to run. Violet caught it in a cage of starfire and wolf gold, and Frank watched through blurring vision as the creature burned, screaming, until nothing remained but ash. The light faded. Violet dropped from the sky. Frank caught her barely, his strength returning in a rush as the mate bond equalized. They collapsed together, both gasping, both alive. Around them, the wolves were picking themselves up, checking wounds, staring at the scorched earth where the shade swarm had been. Victory. 3 trials down. 4 to go. Still think we can win this? Violet whispered against his chest. Frank held her tighter. Ask me after the 4th trial. She laughed weakly. Fair enough. As they helped each other to their feet, supported by Rowan and Thea, Frank felt something shift in the pack. The way they looked at Violet now, not with fear or suspicion, but with respect. She'd saved them, protected them, become one of them. Whatever came next, they'd face it as a pack. All of them. Together. The 4th trial came during a thunderstorm. Lightning split the sky as the storm serpent descended from roiling clouds, its body made of wind and electricity and ancient rage. It took 3 days to defeat, 3 days of Frank's wolves fighting exhaustion while Violet channeled lightning through her celestial fire until her hands bled. They won. Barely. The 5th trial was worse. The Earth Titan rose from the ground itself, a mountain given malicious life. It shattered the castle's outer wall with one blow and took a week to bring down. A week of constant battle, constant fear, watching wolves fall and knowing the next creature would be even stronger. They lost 12 warriors to the Titan. Frank spoke at each funeral, memorizing names, promising their families that their sacrifice wouldn't be forgotten. Violet stood beside him at every service, her hand in his, the mate bond the only thing keeping them both from breaking. 2 left, she whispered one night as they lay in bed, too exhausted to sleep. The 6th and 7th trials. Do you know what they are? The prophecy speaks of the Phantom Court, 1,000 ghosts of warriors who died in ancient battles. And the final trial. She trailed off, her expression haunted. The Voidwalker. A creature that exists between life and death. It can't be killed because it was never alive. Frank's chest tightened. How do we fight something that can't be killed? I don't know. Her voice cracked. The prophecy doesn't say. It just promises that the 7th trial will either break us, or break the curse itself. Then we make sure it breaks the curse. She turned in his arms, her eyes searching his face. What if we can't? What if the prophecy is too strong? Then we die fighting. He kissed her forehead. But we don't give up. Not after everything we've survived. Frank. I mean it. He pulled back to meet her gaze. 5 trials, Violet. We've defeated 5 impossible creatures. We faced shadow and ice and lightning and earth. And we're still here. Still together. Barely. But we are. His hand cupped her face. And that's not luck. That's us. That's the mate bond and our pack and your ridiculous celestial fire that shouldn't work with wolf magic, but somehow does. We're stronger than the prophecy expected. A small smile touched her lips. You really believe that? I have to. He kissed her softly. Because the alternative is unacceptable. The Phantom Court arrived on a moonless night. One moment the courtyard was empty. The next, it was filled with warriors, translucent, ethereal, their armor from a dozen different eras. Vikings with axes. Roman soldiers with gladii. Medieval knights with longswords. All of them silent. All of them deadly. Defensive formation. Frank roared, and his wolves snapped into position around him. The ghosts attacked without warning. Blades passed through armor like it wasn't there, striking flesh, drawing blood. Frank's warriors fought back, but their weapons met only air. Normal steel couldn't touch the dead. Violet. She was already moving, celestial fire blazing from her hands. It struck the nearest ghost, and the creature shrieked, dissolving. But there were hundreds more, and for everyone she destroyed, his wolves were being cut down. We can't hold them. Rowan shouted, blood streaming from a wound across his ribs. Frank's mind raced. Normal weapons were useless. Violet's fire was effective, but she couldn't be everywhere at once. They needed. The mate bond flared hot in his chest, and suddenly he understood. To me, he commanded. Every wolf, to me now. His pack rallied, forming a tight circle with Frank and Violet at the center. The ghosts pressed in, blades raised. Violet, Frank said, his hand finding hers. Remember the shade swarm? When you pulled my wolf fire through the bond. Her eyes widened. You want to do it again? Frank, it nearly killed you. This time we do it differently. He squeezed her hand. We don't pull from just me. We pull from all of them. The entire pack. That's never been done. The mate bond doesn't. It does now. He met her gaze steadily. Trust me? She took a shuddering breath. Always. Frank threw back his head and howled, a sound that carried his alpha command, his absolute authority. Every wolf in the circle responded, their power flooding toward him through the pack bonds. And Frank, standing in the center with his mate's hand in his, became a conduit. Wolf fire from 20 warriors poured into him, through him, into Violet. The mate bond blazed like the sun, and Violet screamed not in pain, but in pure, overwhelming power. Her wings exploded outward, each feather edged in gold and blue fire. Her armor solidified into something that looked forged from stars and wolfsong. And when she raised her free hand, the celestial fire that erupted wasn't just hers. It belonged to the entire pack. The ghosts didn't stand a chance. Wave after wave of combined fire swept across the courtyard, burning away the phantom court like morning mist. The ancient warriors dissolved, their screams fading into silence, until finally, blessedly, it was over. Frank's wolves collapsed, drained but alive. Violet sagged against him, her wings fading, her armor dimming. 6, she whispered. We did it. One more, Frank said, holding her upright. Just one more. But even as he said it, dread pooled in his stomach. Because the 7th trial was the Voidwalker. And prophecy promised it would be the end of everything. They had 3 days of peace before the final summons came. 3 days to bury the dead. To repair the castle. To say goodbye to the lives they'd built, just in case they didn't survive what came next. On the 3rd night, Frank found Violet in the tower overlooking the forest, staring at the moon. Can't sleep, he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Too much thinking. She leaned back against him. Tomorrow, the Voidwalker comes. And we either win, or we don't. We'll win. You don't know that. I know you. He turned her to face him. I know your strength. Your fire. Your absolute refusal to give up even when everything is falling apart. And I know that together, we're unstoppable. Tears shimmered in her eyes. What if I lose you? What if the prophecy takes you anyway, and all of this, everything we've fought for, what if it's not enough? Then you keep fighting. His hands cupped her face. You lead this pack. You protect this kingdom. You live, Violet. For both of us. I don't want to live without you. You won't have to. He kissed her softly. Because I'm not going anywhere. We're going to defeat the Voidwalker. We're going to break this prophecy. And then we're going to have decades of boring, peaceful life where the most exciting thing that happens is you accidentally melting someone's sword. She laughed through her tears. Promise? Promise. It was the 2nd lie he'd told her. But sometimes lies were all you had against prophecy. The Voidwalker appeared at dawn. Not with thunder or ice or shadow, but with silence. One moment the forest was alive with birdsong. The next, it was nothing. Empty. Absent. As if reality itself had decided to stop existing. And in the center of that absence stood a figure. It looked almost human, tall, robed, face hidden beneath a hood. But where it walked, the ground didn't just freeze or wither. It ceased. Colors drained away. Sound stopped. Even the air seemed to forget how to move. This wasn't a creature that killed. It was a creature that unmade. Frank stood at the castle gates with his entire pack behind him. Violet was at his side, her hand in his, the mate bond burning bright and desperate between them. So, Frank said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. You're the one meant to end my bloodline. The Voidwalker's head tilted slightly. When it spoke, its voice was the absence of sound given form. I am the end of all things. The conclusion written in the stars. The prophecy's final word. Then you're in for a disappointment. Frank drew his father's blade. Because we've defeated 6 trials already. What's one more? You misunderstand. The Voidwalker raised one hand, and reality rippled around it. The previous trials were tests. Preparations. I am not here to fight you, Alpha King. Then why are you here? To offer a choice. Violet's hand tightened in Frank's. Through the mate bond, he felt her sudden terror. What choice? She demanded. The prophecy requires the Alpha King's bloodline to end. But it does not specify how. The Voidwalkers had turned toward Violet. You were sent to kill him, Starborn. Complete your original purpose. Strike him down. And I will spare the pack, spare the kingdom, spare everything else. No, Violet said immediately. Or, the Voidwalker continued, the Alpha King can walk into the void of his own will. Let himself be unmade. And again, the pack lives. The kingdom endures. Also no, Frank growled. Or, the Voidwalker's voice dropped to something almost gentle. You both refuse, and I unmake everything. Castle, pack, kingdom. All of it ceases. The prophecy completes itself through total annihilation. Silence fell over the courtyard. Behind them, Frank heard his wolves shifting nervously. Heard Rowan's sharp intake of breath. Heard Theron's whispered prayer to gods that probably couldn't help them anyway. You're lying, Violet said. The prophecy wouldn't demand this. It wouldn't give us a choice. All prophecies give choices. The Voidwalker spread its arms. That is their nature. Fate is not a chain, it is 1,000 possible paths. And you stand at the convergence. Frank's mind raced. If he sacrificed himself, Violet and the pack would live. If Violet killed him, which she never would, but if she did, the same result. Or they could refuse and watch everything burn. No, not burn. Unmake. Cease to exist. How long do we have to decide? He asked. Until I finish walking to your gates. The Voidwalker took a step forward. Reality warped with each movement, colors bleeding away, sounds dying. Frank turned to Violet. Listen to me. No. Her eyes blazed blue. I know what you're thinking, and no. I'm not killing you. I'm not letting you sacrifice yourself. We said together, Frank. We fight together. If we fight, everyone dies. Then everyone dies together. Her voice cracked. Because I am not living in a world where I betrayed everything we built. Where I murdered my mate to save a prophecy that was wrong from the start. Violet. The prophecy said I would destroy your bloodline. She grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. But we're mated, Frank. Bonded. When we have children, if we have children, they'll carry both our lines. Wolf and Celestial. Your bloodline won't end. It'll transform. Frank froze. What? Don't you see? Tears streamed down her face. The prophecy interpreted destruction as death. But destruction can mean change. Evolution. Your bloodline as it existed, pure wolf, untouched by celestial fire, that's what ends. Not you. Not us. Just the old way of things. The Voidwalker had taken another step. 5 steps away now. That's a theory, Frank said desperately. We don't know if. So we test it. Violet turned to face the Voidwalker, and Frank felt power building in her like a storm. We reject all 3 choices. We don't sacrifice. We don't murder. We don't let everything end. Then you choose annihilation, the Voidwalker said. 4 steps away. No. Violet's wings erupted from her back, blazing with combined fire. We choose a 4th option. We choose to break your prophecy at its root. That is impossible. Good. Violet smiled, fierce and bright, and absolutely fearless. I love impossible. She pulled Frank forward, kissed him hard enough to bruise, and whispered against his lips, "Trust me. One last time. Always. Then give me everything. The mate bond, the pack bonds, every ounce of wolf fire in this castle. And don't let go." The Voidwalker took another step. 3 steps away. Frank howled. Every wolf answered. And Violet became a star. Power flooded through the mate bond, not just from Frank, but from Rowan and Thea and Theron and every warrior standing in that courtyard. Wolf fire in a dozen different shades of gold, all of it channeling through Frank, through the mate bond, into Violet. Her wings spread wide enough to shadow the entire castle. Her armor blazed so bright it hurt to look at. And when she raised both hands, celestial fire and wolf fire merged into something the prophecy had never accounted for. Something new. You are prophecy, Violet said, her voice layered with the power of an entire pack. You are old words and older magic. But we are something you didn't predict. Wolf and Star. Warrior and Guardian. Separate lines becoming one. The Voidwalker stopped. 2 steps away from the gate. Your bloodline ends, it said, but there was uncertainty in its voice now. Yes, Violet agreed. The old bloodline ends. Right here. Right now. She pressed her hand to her stomach, and Frank felt it through the mate bond, the tiny, impossible spark of life they'd created. Too new to be felt by anyone else. But there. Real. Growing. Wolf and Celestial. His bloodline transformed. And a new one begins, Violet finished. Your prophecy is complete, Voidwalker. The silver bloodline as it was has ended. Now leave. The Voidwalker stood motionless for an eternity. Then slowly it tilted its head. Clever Starborn. To fulfill prophecy through transformation rather than death. So you'll go. The prophecy is satisfied. My purpose is complete. The creatures had turned to Frank. Your bloodline is ended, Alpha King. And yet you live. Paradox and truth, woven together. The old ways are gone. Something new begins. It raised one hand in what might have been a salute. Then it simply ceased. Not destroyed. Not defeated. Just no longer necessary. Reality rushed back in color and sound and life, flooding the courtyard. Birds sang. Wind moved. The sun rose over the eastern mountains, painting everything gold. The prophecy was broken. Violet collapsed, and Frank caught her, both of them falling to their knees. Around them, wolves hooped and howled, celebration erupting as they realized what had happened. They'd won. Not through sacrifice or murder or destruction. Through transformation. Through choosing a path the prophecy never imagined. You're pregnant, Frank whispered against Violet's hair. We're going to have a child. I was going to tell you. She laughed weakly. Slightly better timing than mid-apocalypse, but... He kissed her. Poured 3 years of fear and love and impossible hope into it. When they finally broke apart, his pack had surrounded them, not threatening, but protective. Rowan grinned like an idiot. Thea was crying. Even Theron looked pleased, which for the old man was practically euphoric. The new bloodline starts here, Frank said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Wolf and Celestial. Old magic and new. And it begins with her. He helped Violet to her feet, and she stood tall despite her exhaustion, wings still glowing softly, armor bright with victory. To Lady Violet. Rowan shouted. Future queen and biggest pain in prophecy's ass. The pack roared their agreement. And Frank, watching his mate smile at his wolves, her wolves now, felt something settle in his chest. The prophecy had promised destruction. Had threatened his bloodline, his kingdom, everything he'd built. But it had brought him her. And that was worth every trial. Every battle. Every moment of fear. So, Violet said, leaning against him. What do we do now? Now. Frank looked at their pack, at their castle, at the forest that had tried so hard to kill them. Now we rebuild. We heal. We prepare for whatever comes next. And if more prophecies show up, then we break those too. He kissed the top of her head. Together. Together, she agreed. As the sun rose fully, bathing the castle in morning light, Frank allowed himself something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Real, solid hope for a future that wasn't written in ancient prophecy or bound by fate. A future they would write themselves. With pack and mate, and the tiny spark of new life that proved transformation was always stronger than destruction. 7 trials defeated. 1 prophecy broken. And 1 very clumsy maid who'd saved a kingdom by refusing to be what destiny demanded. The silver bloodline had ended. Long live the star bloodline. And the Alpha King who'd followed a quiet maid into the forest and found his entire world transformed. The end.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed the story, you will surely love the next one. It's crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out.